Hello, my name is Beth, and I'm a member of the Student Academic Success team at Ambrose University. In Student Academic Success, we're here to make sure you thrive right from the very first moment you join the Ambrose community until you graduate. Every stage in the student experience has challenges, but the first year is often very challenging because you're trying to figure out so many things at once. You're discovering new things about yourself, and you're trying to navigate a new environment. In some ways, it's kind of like visiting a new country. You don't always know where to find things, and you don't always know who to talk to or the language to use to ask the question. Our goal today is to help you learn some of those basic navigational tools for the university experience. You'll learn some key terms, meet some key people, and you'll find out where to go for some key information. To get us started, I've compiled a list of frequently asked questions that I hear often from students, or things that I wish I'd known when I was a student. These questions cover 3 areas: course registration, faculty interaction, and grading. We hope that these questions will get you thinking too. If you're joining us live, we'd love to hear from you at any point throughout the session. Just sign into YouTube and type your comments and questions in the live chat. And we'll pause after each of the 3 rounds to respond to your questions and your comments. To answer our questions today, we have 2 expert panelists, Helen Thiessen, who's our registrar and an executive director of enrollment services, and Dr. Kyle Jansen, professor of history and humanities program chair. Both of our guests have served at Ambrose for many years, and both have roles where they work directly with students just like you. Dr. Jansen teaches courses at every level, including some first-year classes. He also advises students. So in other words, humanities students come to him for advice on choosing courses and planning their program and preparing for their careers. Ms. Thiessen works with faculty to make sure that students thrive all the way throughout their student experience. As our registrar, she oversees things like course scheduling, transfer credit, transcripts, graduation, and more. She also works a lot with prospective students, so she knows about the transition that students often experience in their first year. So as you're beginning your studies at Ambrose, she's a person with a lot of wisdom. To get us started, we'd love to hear from you. So here's my first question for you. What have you found most surprising in your experience at Ambrose so far? If you're signed into the chat, you can take a chance to respond to that question. And while you're responding, we'll take a few minutes to start with some of these questions. Our first round of questions is about course registration. Now, remember, you can ask questions at any time, and at the end of each round, I'll pose your questions to our panelists, but we'll start with a few frequently asked questions. One of the most important deadlines each term is the add drop date. This year, the add drop date for the fall is September 20th, and the add drop date for the winter is January 24th. Then, later in the term, there's something called a withdrawal date. Those 2 dates have huge implications. They can affect your grades, your finances, your status as a full-time and part-time student. So let's start there. Students often have 3 big questions in this area. The first one is, how is withdrawing from a course different than dropping it? Second, if I'm thinking of dropping or withdrawing from a course, what should I consider? Who should I talk to? And then third, how many credits do I need to have full-time status? What are the implications if I drop to part-time? So I'll give the panelists an opportunity to respond to these questions, and if you're thinking of others, feel free to type them into the chat.
Perfect. thanks, Beth, for hosting this chat as we can. Our goal is to really support students in their academic success here and transition to what can be a very interesting and difficult language to understand in university. So, withdrawing from the course, different from dropping it. So we talked about the registration deadline for this Sunday, September 20th. You can go onto your portal as a student and drop your course right away, and you can do that in and out throughout this time. After this Sunday, then we hit into further in the academic semester where it becomes a withdrawal. And if you want to or need to, for different circumstances, withdraw from a course, there is a process for that. So there is a form, as you'll understand very quickly in university academic world, there's a form for almost everything. And so you want to make sure you're aware of those forms and what you need to do in the timelines. And if you want to, all of that is on our website as well. So withdrawing, you would fill out the form, submit it to the Office of the Registrar, and that indicates then specifically an academic where it would show as a W on your transcript of course, and it doesn't affect your GPA. That's the key thing, but it shows that you have gone past the initial registration deadline for it. And you have until November 20th to do that, as Beth said, for this fall semester. So dropping, you can do with no financial or academic penalty before Sunday, and withdrawal, there is no academic penalty, but it does show as a W on your transcript. However, you will receive no refund at that point either past this Sunday. So those are the key things to note there. If you're dropping or withdrawing, what are some considerations to think about? In the midst of all the challenges of adapting to university life, quite often it's to do with financial implications or perhaps just your well-being in the course. You're finding so those are key things. It's not what you needed, life circumstances. If you're dropping or withdrawing, what are some considerations? So you have to take all those things into consideration and then weigh out what the actual implications will be. So we've talked about academic penalty, which there wouldn't be for withdrawal up to November 20th. And we've also talked about financial penalty, which there is after this Sunday up to November 20th. There are other considerations to think of as well. So you want to take a look at your overall course schedule, your timeline for graduation. It depends on which year you're in, what you're looking to do, and how that moves you forward. You also want to look at any scholarships that you're eligible for and your overall course credit count that has implications on funding. So student loans, other external scholarships as well as internal scholarships too. But we really do encourage students to think of their well-being through that, and particularly in these changing times too. So be mindful of that, but there are also implications for that as well. Who should you talk to? We always recommend two people. One, you talk to your faculty advisor, which Dr. Jansen is going to talk a little bit more about later, but also the Office of the Registrar. And then we can help connect the dots and make sure that we've taken care and you understand the implications of that as well. The last question I had is, how many credits do I need to take to have full-time status? Full-time status depends on a number of things, but in general, 9 credits per semester is considered full-time status. So that's critical for student loans in particular, as well as other external funding and bursaries that are available. And other credit counts are into consideration for some of our own internal scholarships, for students on a presidential scholarship, to some of our continuing student scholarships, to Christian high school scholarships and church servant leadership. Some of those have different credit counts, but full-time status is 9 credit hours, and that affects a lot of activities and scholarships through that. I think that answers most of the questions there.
Okay. So let's say the add drop date has passed and the withdrawal deadline has passed too, And then something goes terribly wrong. Maybe I get sick, or a loved one gets sick, and I have trouble finishing my course. What can I do then?
Well, there's a couple of things, and in there, one, we just want to make sure that you are reaching out, and we have an opportunity through what we call a medical withdrawal. So it's hard in the time of crisis to actually communicate, but we really just need and want to support students through that. So communicating with people who are directly involved. So for example, the professor who is teaching the course, you want to make sure you've reached out to them and let them know. Based on those discussions, and it may be involved with a faculty advisor, and then they'll have perhaps some clear direction on whether to take a medical withdrawal, or another option is perhaps time extension on your coursework. So there are a couple options there that to discuss with students, but sometimes it may be best to take a withdrawal, take W, lose the financial, and then regroup again for the next offering of that course. And we can work with students. And it really is one-on-one depending on the medical withdrawal or the circumstances. So yeah, I think that answers that.
I would jump in just for a minute if I could, and just echo what's been said in the sense of talking to your prof. I've had many times over the years where students have come to me and said, "Oh, I have to drop the course." This wouldn't only be because of sickness, but sickness or circumstances, or even just being overwhelmed and feeling like it's too much or something like that. Often that's the product of students not having talked earlier to professors. And one of the challenges that I face every semester is actually convincing students, come talk to me. And I would say whether it's sickness or any other struggle, the first stop would be come talk to me. Go talk to your professor in that class and just say, hey, I'm having a health struggle. And you don't have to spell it out or anything like that, but just, I'm having some issue and I don't think I can finish the course. And then if it's an issue outside of school that does impinge, and that happens, maybe you have to drop the course. But sometimes I found in my experience, it's just that there's a misunderstanding or a student is overwhelmed, and actually with some extra help from the professor or a little tweaking here and there, you actually can finish. So I would always say, go talk to the professor first of all. Even if that feels a bit intimidating, we actually are here for you, and we want to talk to you, and we can often help. Or if it does mean that you have to withdraw, or if we can say, yeah, no, I agree, that's the best course of action, and I think you're doing the right thing. And you can just get the wisdom of some experience, because we as professors, we've seen, lots of different cases of why students either do or don't need to withdraw.
All right. I hope that these responses have been helpful and have prompted other questions from you. So feel free to keep questions coming. We're going to move on to round 2, which is our faculty interaction. This is actually a really nice segue, Kyle, because in faculty interaction can be a huge help for you as you pursue your student life. For many students, it's one of the most wonderful and sometimes the most baffling part of the student life. Faculty always seem really nice, and they're a huge part of the learning experience, but it can be a little hard to know how to approach them. After all, they have strange titles, they have walls of intimidating books. They're also all a little different. Some of them are only here a couple times a week, others are on campus all the time, some go by their first names, some prefer a title like Dr. Draper or Professor Abraham. Luckily for us, we have one of these mysterious creatures with us, and so we can have an opportunity to ask Dr. Jansen some questions. So here's our first batch of questions. First of all, let's understand a little bit about faculty life. What do faculty do when they're not teaching? Where are they? And then also, in relation to the classroom, what are office hours? And why should I go? When do I go? When I do go, what should I ask? What should I say? What can I talk to my prof about? And then last, what's a sabbatical? I've heard this term. What happens if my prof or my advisor is away on sabbatical? So I'll turn that over to you, Kyle.
Thanks, Beth. I just want to clarify, Beth, the order of questions you asked me this time relates to the original order. Do you want me to go that way or to follow what I think is maybe on the PowerPoint?
Jump in with the questions that I asked this time.
Perfect. So, yeah, I feel like a bit of a zoo animal after you introduce that way. Like, we are strange creatures, though, for sure, faculty members. And maybe that's because we've just studied so long and been in books too long or something like that. But I would start by answering the question of what we do when we're not teaching by explaining that in our job descriptions as faculty members, teaching is about half of what we do. We're also responsible to do research and to do what is called citizenship, which includes stuff on campus and stuff off campus. So half the time, roughly, throughout the year, we're teaching. And when you see us in the classroom, that's only a portion of that time, right? We see you for maybe 2.5 hours a week in the classroom. And but what are we doing else at other times? Well, we're prepping for those classes. As professors, we don't get a curriculum in a can. There's no package that we just learn and deliver. We are the ones who develop our own courses in the subject areas. Now, in introductory courses, that's often we follow the textbook quite closely, and there may be a fair bit of resource around that. But in general, we are developing our own courses, and we're constantly updating them too, because the research changes, new information emerges, new questions are being asked. And so there's a lot of just ongoing study and preparation that we do. And then we teach in class, then we have office hours and we meet with students and consult and so on. And then also we have to mark. And just to give you an idea, if there are, say, 50 students in an introductory course, and there's a 5 or 6 page paper that you've written and that I have to mark, well, that might take me a half an hour, sometimes a bit more, sometimes a bit less per paper. So I've got to find 25 hours or have 25 hours set aside to do that alongside all the other things that I'm doing. So, these are all the kinds of things that go into our work as teachers. Now, that's, as I said, is about half of what we do. Beyond that, we're responsible to research. Part of being a professor is being a contributing researcher in the fields of study that we have. And we generally teach more broadly. Our research areas tend to be more specific. So for me, I teach, as Beth said, everything from first year history to history at the movies and the Protestant Reformation and Nazi Germany and genocide and applied research and a few other things. But my research generally focuses around the German churches in the Nazi era, and then some aspects of relating to the Holocaust as well. So I also study and write articles and written a book, and I review books and do other things related to research, prepare conference presentations, go off to academic conferences maybe once or twice a year. So there's a whole life that I have as a researcher in my guild or my professional association. And then 20% of my time, roughly, give or take, throughout the year, is in citizenship. Universities are substantially driven by their faculty. We have many committees that we sit on that help run the university. We make decisions about academics in particular of all kinds. So I'm often in committee meetings once or twice or 3 times a week. And then as well, outside the institution, I might have roles that I play that are citizenship roles. I might advise professional associations or churches or agencies or government, or do things once in a while related to the media. So there are different roles that professors have. When you see us in the classroom, that's just a part of what we do in our teaching role, but we also have research and citizenship roles beyond that. So that's a bit of a long answer to that part, but it helps you understand what we do. And many of us work at home part of the time, especially because a lot of our work takes a lot of concentration. It's very detailed, concentrated work. And so many of us work at home part of the time, as well as in the office. It just depends. That's partly a personal preference thing, partly a stage of life thing. If you've got a young family as a professor, maybe you're going to be in the office a bit more. If you don't, maybe you're going to be at home a bit more where it's quieter. And then the third part, I think, was about office hours. We set aside office hours so that we have dedicated time during the week when we are available for students. We'll do other work if nobody's coming by, but we are there to see you. Now, right now in COVID, it's a bit more complicated. I, for instance, have a kind of an online way you can sign up for office hours. I don't know how many of my colleagues are doing something like that. But generally, in normal circumstances, our doors open at that time. You can just come on by. And if you can't see us just at that time, catch us after class or email and say, hey, when can I meet with you? And we'll be happy to set up a time. That's pretty normal stuff. And what do you talk about? If you're stuck with something in the course, you can ask us, hey, I didn't understand something you said in the lecture this morning, or I got to get ready for my research paper. I'm not sure what topic to write about, or where do I go to get books and articles and resources for that? Or if it's in science, how do I got stuck in the lab. I'm not sure how to do this thing, or anything that you're struggling with related to the course, especially, that's what you come talk to us about. Or if you're really interested about something, hey, I love this thing you were talking about today. I want to know more. We're happy to tell you more about it. And then finally here on sabbaticals, a sabbatical is a time that we as faculty get every few years where we don't have to teach for maybe a semester or sometimes for the whole year. And we can dedicate that time more specifically to usually research projects. Sometimes it means going abroad to do research, not right now, obviously, but it's a more dedicated time to do research. So there are times when faculty, you'll expect that they should be teaching, but in fact, they're not around for a semester. They're on sabbatical, and generally you won't be able to reach them as easily. If they're normally your advisor, generally you'll have a different academic advisor or something like that. So I think that covers the ground on some of those faculty interaction questions, unless there's something else you want me to follow up on, Beth.
Questions that comes out of what are office hours, when do I talk to my prof, is also questions about, say, course planning or about career planning. So that raises our next question. And I think that's on our next slide. What is an academic advisor? When should I meet with him or her? What's a program chair? Similar thing. And then how do I know which person to talk to? My program chair, my advisor, the professor whose class I'm in right now. So kind of like when I'm having conversations, I can go to my prof if I have questions about this class, but what about all the other questions?
Right. So you'll see on your student portal that you have an academic advisor. You may see a couple of names there in some cases, you may see an advisor's name and the program chair name, and sometimes you won't even necessarily know for sure. But in general, you'll each get an academic advisor, and that's somebody that you can go to for help with navigating your degree. So every degree has different requirements in it, and you can ask your academic advisor to help advise you, to help guide you and work with you to pick your courses semester by semester, year by year, so that you fulfill the requirements of your degree. Ultimately, that's your responsibility to get that right, but the advisors are there to help you to make sure you make choices to work your way from the 100, 200, 300, 400 level up through your degree. And that's what you go to talk to an advisor about. What courses do I take? Or should I add a minor to my degree? Or if you're thinking even of switching a major, that you could talk to your academic advisor about that as well. There's some overlap with program chair. So I'm program chair, for instance, because I'm chair of the humanities department. I'm chair for Christian studies, English lit, history and general studies, and university studies. And so you would come to me basically when you need things signed. Now we're doing a lot of that electronically right now via email, but when you fill out one of those many forms that you fill out for various things, I usually have to sign it and just give the okay for that. So if you're thinking of switching programs, that kind of thing, you can certainly also talk to your program chair about that, as well as your advisor. But basically the program chair you'll encounter especially when you need official signatures for things and making moves within your degree program. If you want to switch degrees or switch majors or add minors, or you need a permission to waive a prerequisite for a course or things like that, that'll end up at my desk eventually, or your program chair, depending on what program you're in. So in terms of who to talk to, I think that spells out most of it. Maybe it's appropriate just to say a word, and this goes back to how to interact with faculty a little bit. There's a little bit of overlap here, but maybe a little bit on how to interact with faculty. Beth, maybe I'll just stop and ask, would you like me to talk about that part now as well?
Yeah, actually, we'll go to the next set of slides, or next slide, which is all about that. So what should I know about emailing my professors? How should I address my professor? When I'm writing an email to a professor, are there things that I should say or things that maybe I should avoid saying? And then also, when can I expect to hear back from my professor? And then the last question is kind of, if I have a challenge interacting with a faculty member, what can I do?
So as professors, we all have different personalities. Some are quite introverted. That's not uncommon with academics, actually. Some are more extroverted. Some folks like to keep quite a strong division between their private life and their work as faculty members. Other faculty members are much freer with that kind of thing, and you'll feel like you can have a closer relationship with some than others. That'll just depend a lot on personality. We do certainly like doing what we do. We wouldn't be teaching at a university like Ambrose, which is a teaching first university, if we didn't like working with students. So at a fundamental level, even if we seem intimidating at different times, we want to interact with you. We want to work with you. Office hours are useful for that, as I mentioned before. In terms of emailing, I would, again, different faculty will have a different take on this, but I would strongly advise you to begin in a safe way, and that is to be reasonably formal. So don't write an email like a text, just hey, you, what's up, and are you going to lecture tomorrow or whatever. hello, professor, I have a question for you, um, are we really going to do what's on Moodle, or whatever your question might be. But some faculty will, as they get to know you, default to say, oh, just call me by my first name. But it's better to begin with just professor or doctor if you know that they've got their doctorate, their PhD. But professor is just a really safe. So even just, students come up to me and say, hey, professor, I'll say, hey, what? Or Professor Jansen. And that's a safe way to start. And then I would also say, take your cues from the way that they email you. For instance, I always sign all my emails to students, Dr. J. And that's because I don't want to be known as Kyle. If I'm talking to Helen, my colleague, I'll call her Helen. She'll call me Kyle. I'll call Beth, and she'll call me Kyle. But with students, I would rather just professor or doctor, but I'll use Dr. J because I want you to know that I'm not too stuffy, right? And so you just have to kind of read your professor and sort of get a sense. And you can always ask, say, how would you like me to address you? They might get a bit flustered because it's a bit of an awkward question, but you're always safe, I think, starting with professor and then taking your cues from the way that they email back to you or the way that they speak back to you. You can expect, I think, to hear back from faculty, I would hope within 24 hours. There may be cases, though, where if somebody is really busy with something, or if they're away at a conference, or it sometimes takes a couple of days. We get emails at all hours of the day and night. Sometimes I'm working late and will respond at 10 or 11 at night. But usually, it'll be the next day you'll hear. And on weekends, that can be pretty iffy too, So I tend not to even look at my email on Sunday. I just take that day completely away from that. So, but I would think, 1 to 2 days you can expect to hear back. And if it's time sensitive, just note that in your email to them. I'm going to turn to the interpersonal issue now, I think. Is that right, Beth? Okay. Again, like I mentioned a minute or two ago, some faculty want to keep more to themselves in terms of the kind of relationship they have to you. They want to keep it a bit more formal, a bit more professional. Others are very relational and happy to really invite you more into their lives. And so, different professors, this will mean different things. But and I would say also social media is a tricky thing. Some faculty are on social media a lot, some aren't, but they may or may not sort of want to engage with you on social media. It will be quite variable. So don't take offense if they do or don't. It really is a sort of personal preference thing. I was thinking, though, about interpersonal issues, and I think there are 3 reasons that there sometimes are misunderstandings or even clashes between students and faculty. First of all, I would say that sometimes life happens, and professors and students are all people. So sometimes there'll be a student and they won't be around in class very, very regularly, and I'll be like, what's going on? Like this is, they don't really care. I may be tempted to think they don't really care, but in fact, maybe their parent has got an illness, or somebody has died in their family, or something like that. So the best thing is, if something's going on in your life, you don't have to disclose it, of course, but you can just say, hey, I have a big personal issue that's going on, so I actually can't be in class all the time right now. Or you can say, my mom has cancer and I have to care for her sometimes, so, or whatever. And that happens sometimes to us, and sometimes you'll hear about it and sometimes you won't. I tend to be a bit more open. I had a situation a couple of years ago where we had a sudden death in the family. And I said to this, I thought, there's no way I can not say something, because I was really reeling. And I just said to the students, I'm not going to be totally on my game this semester. I'm going to do my best, but please just cut me a little slack if things seem a little bit more chaotic than they should, because I'm also dealing with stuff on my life side here. So sometimes that can create misunderstandings, and good communication helps with that. Second, I would say, these days especially, the world is really politicized, and there's a lot of high tension and conflict. Social media, people are screaming at each other. There's a lot of opinions flying around. And when you come into university, a lot of these topics are going to be topics that you're going to learn about, and there's going to be discussion about, and there can be potential for disagreement and conflict. And I would just say that I think it's helpful for you to know that our role is to be introducing hard questions, controversies, different points of view. We're going to challenge you in the way that you think. And that doesn't mean that what we're saying is necessarily a reflection of what we think personally. You may or may not get a sense of that. And you may think you know, but you might actually not know, because what we're trying to do is to raise controversies and deal with hard topics in our classes sometimes. And so I would just say that, we really want to work with evidence and not just throw opinions around. And you really want to try to keep an open mind as much as you can, and not get offended, and not, there will sometimes with fellow students and with faculty be potential conflict. And sometimes that revolves around identity. I know, I'll be honest with you, as a 6'3" or whatever I am, older male professor, I don't get a lot of pushback from students. I can look scary if I need to, and but I have colleagues who are women, who are people of color, and students sometimes feel like they can take license and just not respect them as much as I would get respect just because of who I am. So I would also encourage you to just recognize that your professors have done a lot of work to get where they are. They've studied hard and they know a lot, and that they're worthy of respect. And that will help you also not to come into conflict. Not that you can't challenge what they say or debate them, but that has to be done in a respectful, civil way. And then the final thing I would just say is sometimes professors will find it frustrating if students are just not caring enough, or not about their own work, or not taking the time to do what they should do. So sometimes we get questions of, like, the famous eye roll for professors is read the syllabus, because we put lots of stuff in the syllabus and on Moodle. And so first thing, if you've got a question, go back to the syllabus, go back to Moodle, and see if you can find the answer there. And then by all means, if you can't, then ask your question. It's great. But, I think professors can sometimes find it frustrating if they feel like students just they're kind of half there and they don't care. So what we are really eager to do is to work with students as they own their own learning, as they take initiative and responsibility for their own learning, and then we're like all in to help. And so yeah, if you've got conflicts, if you're frustrated about something, go talk to your professor. That's the first step, always, always, always. Usually that'll resolve almost everything. And then if there's a problem beyond that, go talk to the program chair. Come talk to me if it's a faculty in my area, and that'll be the next step along the way. Yeah, I think that's probably enough on that. But if you want me to say anything more or clarify anything, Beth, just say.
Now, moving on, in keeping with what we've been talking about, one of the most stressful parts of student life is grading. And that's sometimes where confusion comes from. So if you're new to university life, new to Alberta, new to Ambrose, the system might be a little bit unfamiliar for you. For example, in Our grading system, there's an A minus, an A, and an A plus, but there's no such thing as a D minus or an E. It's a weird system. So we want to think about some of the questions that might come to mind in the area of grading. So one of our questions here is, how do letter grades work? And how do they relate to percentages? Because lots of us are more familiar with percentages. And then if we can grab the next slide as well, we'll do them together. What is a GPA? What are the two types of GPAs? And then how do I know if I'm doing okay? What's a healthy GPA? What happens if my GPA is too low? And then what's Dean's List? So I'll pass those questions over to Helen.
Perfect. Yes, I'll take some of these questions here and tag team on those. Letter grades. So when you're in the university system, we follow what is a common grading system, and what can be referred to, particularly in the province of Alberta, is a 4.0 grade point average grading system. So we convert letters to equal what we call a grade point average. You can find that on our academic calendar. That is our approach to letter grades and the equivalent grade point average that would show up when you hear people talking about, I have a 4.0 or a 2.5 or a 3.5. What does that mean? So that's what they're referring to is your grade point average. How does it relate to percentages? Some of our faculty grade with percentages, and then that is converted. So a couple of things to note that will be perhaps mind-blowing and a little hard to get your head around, but is quite standard in the academic world as well. So one is that for each course has percentages that will equal different things, and that is up to the course syllabus and the faculty grading. Some departments will have a common grading percentage, others won't. Nothing is too out with bizarre. They're pretty standard within in the range that they are. However, there may be a percentage or two difference between departments, and Dr. Jansen can chime in on that at some point too, but that's just something to know. When the grades are submitted to the Office of the Registrar, and we are in charge of your final grades and what that looks like, it is then converted to a letter grade. So letter grade is what we get in our office, and then that is what equals a grade point average, specifically as is noted in our academic calendar. So you can find that grading system on our website, academic calendar. So while we see an A plus, an A, like an A plus is a 4.0, an A is a 4.0, and then an A minus drops to a 3.7. So that's where that balances out for how and why that relates to percentages. Can I earn a D? Yes. Is there such a thing as an E? No. So this is grades stop at the D, and then you go down to an F, which is a fail in the course at that point. The grading system is just developed over the years in academia throughout university life, and E never came. I actually did a little search of like, why is there no E? What is that question? Because I like to know these things too. But it came down to a very simple D is your minimal pass as a 1.0 in our grade point average, and then you drop to an F. And we don't get into specifics of what the F would look like or below that. So that takes care of that and that question there on grade points. What is a GPA? So GPA technically stands for grade point average, and this is how your grades, your transcript, your GPA would be converted. So I'm going to try and explain this simply, but it is detailed in the academic calendar as well. Simply put is if you get an A, that equals a 4.0 in a course. So however many 4.0s or 3.7 or 2.0s are then added together, and that shows how many quality points how many points you achieved this semester. And then you divide that number by the amount of credit hours you've taken, and that gives your GPA. And then there are two kinds of GPA that we look at. We look at a semester GPA. So you will sometimes see S GPA on certain things. And then we look at cumulative. So then this affects your cumulative of, say, you're in your second year. How you did in your first year affects your second year and your overall cumulative GPA. So there are two things to take into consideration there. What is a healthy GPA? What do I need? What should I be looking for? There's a couple ways to look at this. So ultimately, a 2.0 GPA is what you need in order to graduate from a program. Anything less than a 2.0, you will not be able to graduate. And this comes down to that you are academically proficient in the degree and in the coursework that you have attempted here at Ambrose. And this shows academic integrity. This affects our accreditation. This shows that you are worthy of this degree in the knowledge base that you have gained through your time here. So 2.0 is what we would consider the minimum low-end benchmark, but you're passing at that point, and you need that in order to graduate, and that is cumulative GPA. So there are semesters where you maybe just have a really bad semester. We hope not, and we hope that we can help you before you get to that point, but it does happen. And so you can have a semester that is below 2.0 and then be able to pick that up as you move through towards graduation and increase your GPA to meet the requirements that you need. So that would be what we consider a minimal healthy GPA. If your GPA is too low, then we do have some automatic academic supports in place, and ultimately that could lead to academic suspension. So there are some repercussions, there are some consequences to low grades. And the way I frame those is I'm often the one that's communicating those to students is that we put enough supports in place to help you adjust to university life, to adjust to the coursework, to adjust to the rhythm of being in university, how to write a paper, how to understand what's happening in the academic world and in your coursework. So we want to get to that point. But after a buildup of many semesters or 2 semesters, how many credits you've taken, your GPA may still be low. There are a couple of things that take into effect at that point. One is academic probation. So we see we see that you're struggling. We alert your faculty advisor. We then would perhaps put you on academic probation, where we want to actually limit what you're taking. And the limitation is not to punish you. The limitation is to help you succeed in those courses. So perhaps taking a less course load, not being involved in athletics, student leadership, some extra co-curricular activities will help you focus on the academics component to build your GPA. The worst case scenario is that you may be asked to leave the university for a 12-month period of time, and that would be academic suspension. And again, we want you to graduate. That is the purpose of a university education. So if we continue to allow you to be here, we are setting you up for the inability to graduate. That's a waste of your money and your time. What we really want you to do is maybe take the break away, sort out some of those things that are perhaps conflicting with your academic coursework, and then regroup and come back with supports in place to then come back to university life. The last thing is that on the opposite end of the low end of GPA is where we get to talk about Dean's List, and this is based on academic excellence. So each semester we recognize students who would make the Dean's List. Superior academic achievement is what we call it. And you have to have earned at least a 3.5 semester GPA on a minimum of 12 credits at Ambrose. So, and that's where we put in the academic excellence side of things for Dean's List portion there. So I think that touches base with the points of grading there.
Maybe just to jump in for a second, I would just add, just to help sort of, because it's such a new language, this grading. So when Helen talks about a 2.0 as the minimum satisfactory that you need in order to graduate, that's a C level. And it can be confusing because you can pass courses and still not be able to graduate at the end of the day, because if you're getting all D's or D pluses or C minuses. And so that's why we have these academic intervention and probation and so on, to help just put a check in. If we think that, oh, you're maybe going down that path, we want to help you and get you back on track. And similarly, the Dean's List at 3.5, that's right between a B plus and an A minus. A B plus is a 3.3 and A minus is a 3.7. So if you're achieving just kind of somewhere in between there, then you're sort of at the level of Dean's List. So you'll get used to hearing these numbers and this language of earning a C or getting a B or having a 2.5 on an assignment, which won't correspond to a B plus or sorry, a 2.5 would be, well, you got somewhere between a C plus and a B minus. And sometimes, so you have to get to know the letters and the numbers that way. And don't get too hung up on the percentages. They do vary from course to course, and that can be sometimes a bit confusing. The letter grades and the corresponding 4.0 numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, that's what matters.
Okay, we're coming to the end of our time. So I do want to let you know that we do have another upcoming event. If you enjoyed this discussion, we're having another one kind of like it in a few weeks called Academicese 2, Reaching Your Goals. In this session, you'll have a chance to ask Ambrose faculty and staff your questions about a variety of issues, especially related to program planning. If you're interested in educational travel, a double major, practicum, transfer credit, any of those things, you'll definitely want to be there. I want to thank our two panelists so much for your comments today. And thank you also to all of you for attending. We look forward to seeing you soon for our next income, expenses, and budget session. And for more information about any of our events, you can visit our website at ambrose.edu/workshops. Thanks again, and bye for now.
Strong.